Imagine you're walking onto a construction site. You see this symphony of controlled chaos, right? Cranes soaring, workers moving with this incredible precision, and the air is just filled with the sounds of progress. But have you ever paused, really paused, to consider the unseen forces, the intricate human systems, and even the historical battles that shape every single aspect of that work? From the wages people get paid to the safety protocols they follow, even the actual skills of the people building our world. Today, we're taking an expansive deep dive into one of those powerful and, let's face it, often misunderstood forces in the construction industry. Trade unions. We'll trace their, dramatic origins back in the industrial crucible of the 19th century. We'll try to unravel their core functions, collective bargaining, safety advocacy. We'll explore the mechanics, how they actually operate day to day. We'll also look at the criticisms often leveled against them, and finally, see how they're adapting or trying to adapt to a rapidly changing landscape.
Our mission here is really to cut through the noise, the headlines, and give you a balanced, well-informed perspective on the complex legacy and the modern relevance of organized labor. It's about giving you a shortcut to understanding a really vital part of construction's social and economic fabric. And to guide us through this pretty intricate story, we've gathered a fascinating stack of sources. We've got vivid historical accounts of early labor struggles, contemporary economic analyses, detailed studies of union training programs, and even critical examinations of their evolving role. So get ready for an engaging conversation. We're going to connect the dots across, more than a century of human effort and societal change. Okay, let's unpack this then. When we think about the power unions have today, sometimes it's easy to forget they didn't just appear out of thin air, right? They were clearly born from necessity. So where did these fundamental ideas, this impulse for workers to actually organize, where did it truly begin in construction? What were those initial sparks, say, back in the 19th and early 20th centuries?
Yeah, what's really illuminating, I think, is that the union movement, especially in construction, it wasn't some, grand theoretical thing dreamed up in an office. It was a visceral, a human response to conditions that, frankly, are hard for us to even imagine today. You have to picture the industrial boom, 19th century. Cities are just exploding with new buildings. Factories are churning out materials like never before.
Right, a huge period of growth.
Huge growth. But for the workers, it was often brutal. Just absolutely brutal. Our sources paint a really stark picture. Dangerous job sites were just the norm. Safety was rudimentary, if it existed at all. Accident rates were horrific. Wages, often barely enough to survive, leaving families constantly on the edge of poverty. And there was zero job security. Absolutely none.
Wow.
A worker could be hired in the morning and fired by lunch on a whim. No reason needed, no recourse.
So it was really a fight for basic human dignity, for survival itself, not just about getting a few extra dollars an hour. It sounds desperate.
It absolutely was desperate. I mean, try to imagine a time before workers' comp, before minimum wage laws, before safety standards were even really a concept that employers considered. If you got hurt on the job, and people got hurt a lot, you were simply replaced. That was it. Your family faced destitution.
Just discarded.
Pretty much. And this acute vulnerability, this constant insecurity, that's what ignited the impulse for collective action. An individual worker, had absolutely no bargaining power against these powerful industrialists. They're the big contractors. But when they started banding together, they found strength. They found power in numbers. Early craft unions started forming carpenters, bricklayers, ironworkers.
The skilled trades.
Exactly, the skilled trades. And these early unions weren't just about demanding higher pay, though that was part of it, of course. They were fundamentally about creating a shield against exploitation and also building a shared sense of community, mutual aid, helping each other out when someone got sick or injured. It was a profound act of self-preservation, really, and also collective aspiration. They wanted something better.
That's a powerful way to put it, collective aspiration. So from these, desperate beginnings, unions developed these core functions that really became their bedrock. Let's dig into those, maybe starting with collective bargaining. That seems central.
Collective bargaining is absolutely at the heart of the union model. It's essentially the process where a union, acting as the representative for a group of employees, negotiates with an employer. Or, often in construction, it's an association of employers, negotiating over wages, hours, benefits, working conditions, the whole package.
So instead of every single worker trying to negotiate their own deal, which is inherently unequal, right? The little guy versus the big company.
Exactly. The power imbalance is huge. The union provides that unified voice. This allows them to establish standardized wage rates, often significantly above what individual workers could ever hope to command on their own.
So it's not just setting a higher wage, but also creating consistency, fairness across the board, maybe removing that sort of race to the bottom that must have characterized the earlier era.
Precisely. It stops employers from pitting workers against each other to drive down wages. But it goes, far beyond just the hourly wage. These collective bargaining agreements, they're often called contracts or master agreements in construction. They typically include really comprehensive benefit packages. Things like health insurance, retirement plans, pensions were a huge union achievement. Paid holidays, vacation time, stuff we might take for granted now, but these were virtually unheard of for blue-collar workers before unions thought for them.
Yeah.
So for the worker, it provides economic stability, a safety net. And for the industry itself, even if contractors complain about costs, it arguably creates a more stable, more professionalized workforce. It can reduce turnover, attract better talent.
Even if it does come with those higher direct labor costs.
Right, that's the trade-off. But fundamentally, it represents a shift from that individual precarity, that constant worry, to a form of collective security.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about safety, job site safety? That's an area where unions are often seen as, well, absolute champions. What was the driving force there, and how did they make such a, profound impact?
Safety was critical from the very beginning, and it absolutely remains so. You have to remember, late 19th, early 20th century, construction was legitimately one of the most dangerous jobs you could possibly have.
Right.
Accident rates were astronomical, and there was little to no regulation. Government wasn't stepping in effectively. Employers often weren't prioritizing it. So unions stepped into that vacuum. They recognized that a safe workplace wasn't just a moral imperative, though it certainly was that, but it was also an economic issue for their members. A dead or injured worker isn't earning a wage. So they advocated fiercely for regulations. They often pushed for specific safety equipment, for mandatory training, for safer work practices, long, long before they were required by law.
So it wasn't just about complaining about the danger. It was actively trying to find and implement solutions to, well, save lives and prevent injuries.
Precisely. And crucially, they empowered their members to refuse unsafe work. That was revolutionary at the time. The idea that a worker could say, no, that's too dangerous, I'm not doing it, without immediate dismissal.
That's a huge shift in power dynamic right there.
Absolutely huge. They also established things like job site safety committees, developed internal safety protocols, this proactive stance demanding proper scaffolding, demanding protective gear, insisting on clear safety procedures. It ultimately benefited everyone on site. Many of the safety standards we now just take for granted, hard hats, as you mentioned, safety harnesses, even simple things like guardrails on high floors, you can trace their origins directly back to union advocacy. And interestingly, even in non-union environments, the pressure from organized labor often set a benchmark. It forced the entire industry, union and non-union alike, to improve its safety record. It elevated standards for all workers, regardless of whether they were carrying a union card.
That's a really powerful testament to their influence, that ripple effect. Now, let's talk about training, because unions are also renowned for providing really high-quality apprentice training. How does this fit into their core functions, and what makes it so distinctive?
Union apprenticeship programs are often held up, quite rightly, as the gold standard in the construction trades. They represent a massive investment in human capital, in skills. The structure is typically a blend. You have on-the-job training, where apprentices learn directly from experienced journey persons, learning the craft hands-on. But crucially, it's combined with classroom instruction, covering theory, safety regulations, new technologies, blueprint reading, math, whatever the trade requires.
So it's not just learning by watching or doing. It's a formal, structured education designed to produce genuinely skilled workers.
Exactly. These aren't short programs either. They're typically multi-year commitments, often 4 or even 5 years long, rigorously structured to ensure a really comprehensive skill set by the end. The unions, usually in partnership with signatory contractor associations, fund and administer these programs jointly. This ensures a consistent pipeline of highly qualified, highly skilled, and importantly, safety-conscious craftspeople entering the industry.
Right.
For instance, a union electrician apprentice isn't just learning basic house wiring. They're learning complex industrial controls, systems integration, safety codes, ensuring they're competent across a huge range of tasks. And this contrasts pretty sharply with some less formalized training paths out there, which might rely more on, ad hoc learning or just picking up whatever skills happen to be needed on a single job.
Yeah, you might learn one thing really well, but lack the breadth.
Precisely. Union training aims to instill not just technical ability, but also a strong work ethic, pride in craftsmanship, adherence to quality standards. And this commitment to skill development is a major value proposition for contractors who sign with the unions. It provides them a reliable, predictable source of competent labor. It's this continuous cycle of knowledge transfer that maintains craft traditions while also adapting to new demands.
Okay, so moving from that historical context and the core functions to, well, the nuts and bolts of how unions actually operate today in construction, a key mechanism seems to be the union hiring hall. This sounds like a central hub. Can you break down how it functions and what role it really plays?
Yeah, the union hiring hall is a really fascinating and fundamental aspect of how unionized construction works. You can think of it essentially as a central labor exchange. It's like a specialized job placement service run by the union for its members. So when a union contractor needs skilled workers for a project, let's say they need a dozen iron workers for a steel erection job or 20 carpenters to frame a building, they don't just put an ad out. They contact the local union hiring hall for that trade.
Okay.
The hall then dispatches qualified union members from its list. Usually this is done on a rotating basis based on things like who's been out of work the longest, their specific skills, certifications needed for that job. It's designed to be a fair and efficient system for both sides.
So for the contractors, it's almost like having access to a pre-screened, ready-to-deploy workforce, right? Tailored to their exact needs for a particular project without them having to do the recruiting.
Exactly that. The benefit for contractors is pretty immense, actually. They get immediate access to a pool of certified, highly trained, and often very experienced workers. They don't have to go through the time-consuming and, frankly, expensive process of recruitment, vetting, checking credentials, maybe initial safety training themselves.
Saves a lot of hassle.
It really does. And it allows them to scale their workforce up or down rapidly as project demands change. That's incredibly valuable in construction, which is notoriously cyclical. You need 10 guys this week, 50 next week, maybe only 5 the week after. The hall facilitates that flexibility. Plus, they know the workers being dispatched have generally completed the rigorous union apprenticeship programs and hold the necessary certifications.
Okay, and then flipping that, for the workers themselves,
Yeah.
what's the advantage of being part of this hiring hall system?
For the union members, the hiring hall offers a degree of job security and employment consistency that's pretty rare in an industry known for its seasonal nature and project-based work. Instead of constantly pounding the pavement looking for the next job when one project ends, they register their availability at the hall. Then they're dispatched to projects according to the established rules. This can provide a more steady income stream over time. It also ensures access to benefits like health insurance or pension contributions that often accrue based on hours worked across multiple employers, managed centrally. And, crucially, it ensures they're paid according to the collectively bargained wage rates for that classification of work.
Right, no undercutting.
Exactly. It removes a lot of the pressure and uncertainty of individual job hunting and ensures that fair dispatching rules are followed, minimizing potential favoritism, and promoting, at least in theory, equitable access to work opportunities among the members. It's really a mechanism designed to create stability in what's inherently a pretty unstable work environment.
That makes perfect sense for ensuring that reliable flow of talent and providing some stability. However, our sources also bring up something called jurisdictional disputes as a potential area of conflict within the union structure itself. What exactly are these and why do they happen?
Yes. Jurisdictional disputes. They are indeed a unique challenge within the multi-craft environment of construction unions. They happen when 2 or more different trade unions claim the right to perform a specific piece of work on a particular job site.
Okay, so like who gets to do what?
Pretty much. For instance, is the installation of certain specialized conduit primarily electrical work belonging to the electricians union? Or is it more related to pipe systems falling under the pipe fitters jurisdiction? Or maybe is placing a particular type of concrete formwork the job of the carpenters who traditionally build forms? Or is it simpler work that falls to the laborers? These seemingly minor distinctions can become major points of contention.
It sounds almost like a turf war, essentially, but maybe with a deep historical basis.
That's actually a pretty fair analogy. They really stem from a long, long history of craft specialization in construction. Each trade union has historically carved out and defined its specific scope of work, often based on tradition, specific skill sets developed over generations, and past agreements or precedents. The problem is modern construction methods, new materials, innovative technologies, they often blur these traditional lines. A new composite material or a novel installation technique might not clearly fall into one established craft's historical domain.
Ah, so innovation can actually cause these disputes.
It definitely can. It leads to disputes over who owns that new type of work. Each union, understandably, wants to protect the work opportunities for its members.
And what's the practical impact when these disputes flare up on a project? Does work just stop?
The impact can be pretty significant, unfortunately. Jurisdictional disputes can lead to costly delays, sometimes even project shutdowns if things escalate. They can certainly create tension and strain relationships between different trades working side by side on a site. Contractors obviously get caught in the middle, they just need the work done, but assigning it to the wrong trade, from one union's perspective, can escalate the conflict dramatically. Resolution typically involves negotiation between the unions involved. Sometimes it goes to arbitration. There are even formal mechanisms, like joint committees established by the Building Trades Department of the AFL-CIO, specifically set up to adjudicate these claims based on established agreements and precedents, like the Plan for the Settlement of Jurisdictional Disputes.
A formal process.
Yes, but while the goal is always to protect work for their respective members, these disputes can sometimes be seen, particularly by owners and contractors, as an impediment to efficiency and collaborative work on site. It really highlights an inherent tension within the multi-craft union system itself.
Okay, so we've explored the historical need, the functions, the operational mechanics, acknowledging the profound impact unions have had. But like any powerful institution, they also face some significant criticism. One of the most common ones you hear is the perception of high costs. What are the specifics behind that criticism, and how do unions typically respond to it?
Yeah, the criticism of high costs is definitely pervasive, and it's generally rooted in the fact that union labor packages, and that's the key, the package, meaning wages plus benefits, are often demonstrably higher than their non-union counterparts in the same market. You look at a collectively bargained agreement, it will typically specify higher hourly wage rates. It will include comprehensive health and welfare plans, which cost money. It mandates substantial pension contributions. Often it includes more generous overtime rules, like double time after a certain number of hours or on weekends.
And sometimes work rules, too.
Exactly. Union contracts can sometimes include specific work rules, things like mandated crew sizes for certain tasks, or limitations on workers performing tasks outside their specific trade classification, which critics argue can increase the total labor cost and reduce flexibility for the contractor on a job site.
So from a purely budgetary perspective, looking at the spreadsheet, a unionized project can certainly appear more expensive, at least on the line item, for labor. But is that the full picture? Is it always that simple?
That's the crucial distinction, and it's where the debate really lies. While that direct labor cost per hour or the cost of the total package might be higher on paper, proponents of union labor argue pretty strongly that this is often offset by several other factors that impact the total project cost. Firstly, there's the argument about productivity, that rigorous apprenticeship training we talked about. It's designed to ensure a highly skilled, efficient, and productive workforce. A well-trained, experienced union journey person often completes tasks more quickly and, importantly, with fewer errors. That potentially reduces costly rework.
Fewer mistakes means less time and money fixing them.
Precisely. Secondly, there's safety. Unions are widely recognized for promoting a strong safety culture. Fewer accidents mean lower workers' compensation insurance premiums for the contractor, fewer lost work days, and reduced project delays related to injuries or safety stand-downs. That's a significant cost factor. Thirdly, stability. The combination of higher wages and better benefits often results in lower employee turnover among union workers. Constantly hiring and training new staff is expensive and disruptive. A stable, experienced crew can be more efficient.
Okay.
So it really becomes a debate about immediate direct costs versus overall value, long-term project efficiency, quality, and safety. It's rarely as simple as just comparing the hourly rate.
That makes a lot of sense, looking beyond just that hourly number to the kind of total cost of quality and safety and productivity. Now, another significant criticism often leveled at unions is this perceived resistance to new technologies and methods. Where does that perception come from?
Well, this criticism often arises from historical instances and sometimes ongoing situations where unions have perhaps been hesitant or perceived as hesitant to adopt certain new technologies or more efficient work methods as quickly as some would like. The underlying reason, often from the union perspective, is a very real and frankly understandable fear. It's fear of job displacement. or what's sometimes called the de-skilling of trades.
Meaning the technology makes the human skill less valuable.
Exactly. When a new machine comes along that can do the work of several people, or when a prefabricated component manufactured in a factory significantly reduces the amount of on-site labor hours needed for installation, well, that can pose a pretty existential threat to the livelihoods of the members whose jobs are affected.
So it's maybe not necessarily an outright rejection of progress itself, but more a deep concern for the human impact of that progress on their members' jobs and futures. Can you give us some concrete examples of this tension?
Sure. Historically, you saw resistance to certain types of power tools that mechanized tasks traditionally done by hand, fearing it would reduce the need for skilled craftspeople. More recently, you've seen debates around the widespread adoption of things like large-scale prefabrication. Prefab, where entire building sections, walls, bathroom pods, mechanical racks are assembled off-site in a controlled environment, can drastically cut down on construction time and potentially improve quality control.
And it moves the work.
Exactly. It shifts a significant amount of labor away from the traditional construction job site and into a factory setting. This can potentially reduce the number of on-site hours available for various trades like carpenters, electricians, plumbers who would normally do that assembly work in the field. Similarly, innovations like BIM building information modeling, which radically streamlines design, coordination, and clash detection, initially faced some skepticism as trades had to adapt to completely new digital workflows and skill sets. The challenge for unions, and many are actively engaging with this, is how to adapt. How do they find new roles for their members within these evolving technologies? How do they ensure their members receive the training needed to work with these new tools and methods rather than being left behind by them? It's this constant tension between embracing technological advancement for efficiency and protecting the workforce.
Yeah, a difficult balance. Now, beyond technology specifically, there's also this perception sometimes of inefficiencies or lack of flexibility due to certain union work rules. What are some examples of those rules, and what's the rationale behind them, at least from a union standpoint?
This often comes down to the really detailed provisions you might find within collective bargaining agreements. They can outline very specific work assignments, dictate minimum crew sizes for certain operations, or even regulate break schedules quite strictly. For example, a contract might stipulate that only an operating engineer can start or monitor a small portable generator, even if another qualified worker is standing right there. Or it might mandate, say, a 3-person crew for a task that a contractor genuinely believes could be safely and efficiently performed by 2.
Okay.
Critics argue that these kinds of rules can sometimes lead to slower work progress, maybe some redundant labor on site, and can make it difficult for contractors to adapt quickly to changing job site conditions or unexpected issues that inevitably crop up.
So a rule that might have been originally designed to protect a specific craft's work, or maybe ensure a certain level of safety, could, in some specific situations, be seen as an impediment to overall project efficiency from the contractor's viewpoint.
Exactly. That's the core of the criticism. However, from the union's perspective, these rules aren't arbitrary. They usually weren't just made up yesterday. They're often born from decades, sometimes centuries, of experience in hard-won battles. They're typically designed, in the union view, to ensure workers' safety. Maybe that third person is needed as a spotter. They're there to maintain the quality of workmanship by ensuring tasks are done by those with a specific training. They aim to prevent one trade from encroaching on another's specialized skills that protects jurisdiction. And yes, they're also about ensuring a fair distribution of the available work among the membership.
So those minimum crew sizes, for instance, might be argued as absolutely necessary for lifting heavy objects safely without injury, or maybe for ensuring sufficient eyes are on a complex, potentially hazardous task.
Precisely. The real challenge, and this is an ongoing negotiation in the industry, lies in finding a balance. How can these protections, these established rules, evolve to meet modern demands for efficiency, for flexibility, for new ways of working, without completely undermining the core goals of safety, quality, and worker welfare that they were originally intended to uphold? It's a continuous process of negotiation and adaptation, really, often driven by the specific demands of the local market, the type of project, and frankly, the ingenuity of both labor leaders and management to find common ground and workable solutions.
Okay, so we've explored the origins, the mechanics, the functions, and also the criticisms. Now, let's look at the trajectory, the path of unions in construction more recently. Our sources consistently highlight a significant decline in membership over the past several decades. What's been driving that trend, and what kind of impact has it had?
Yeah, the decline in union density, particularly in the private sector construction industry in the U.S., is a pretty well-documented and significant trend. Union membership across the board peaked, back in the mid-20th century. It represented a much, much larger share of the overall workforce, including construction, than it does today. Several factors have contributed to this decline over the decades. One major influence, certainly, has been the significant growth of the non-union or open shop sector of the construction industry. These non-union contractors often compete aggressively, primarily on lower labor costs and what they promote as greater flexibility in work rules and assignments.
So just a fundamental shift in the market dynamics created more direct competition for unionized firms and labor.
Exactly. Another really significant factor has been the changing legislative and legal landscape, particularly the proliferation of so-called right-to-work laws in many U.S. states. These laws essentially prohibit union security agreements clauses in contracts that would otherwise require all employees in a unionized workplace to either join the union or pay agency fees to cover the cost of representation as a condition of keeping their job.
So it allows workers to benefit from the union contract without paying dues.
That's the effect, yes. And it undeniably weakens the financial stability and the organizational power of unions by making it much harder for them to maintain membership levels and the resources needed for organizing, bargaining, and contract enforcement. Beyond that, you also have changing economic landscape, shifts away from heavy industry globalization, shifts in industry demographics. And you can't discount the impact of sustained, often sophisticated, anti-union campaigns run by some employer groups and political organizations over the years. It's been a confluence of factors.
Yeah, right. And what's been the impact of this decline? Both on the unions themselves, obviously, but also maybe on the broader construction industry.
Well, for the unions themselves, it has clearly meant a reduction in their overall bargaining power in many areas, less political influence than they perhaps once wielded, and in some regions and sectors, a significantly shrinking market share for union contractors. This has forced many unions to confront some pretty existential questions about their future and their strategy. For the broader industry, the impact of the decline is, well, it's debated. Some argue it has fostered greater competition, maybe spurred innovation, lowered construction costs in some cases. Others, however, point to potential negative consequences. Things like a weakening of overall labor standards, a widening wage gap between skilled and unskilled workers or between union and non-union, and potentially a decline in the overall quality and consistency of workforce training in certain areas, as the non-union sector's training models can vary quite significantly in their quality and rigor.
And safety, too.
In safety, absolutely. While safety has improved industry-wide, the consistent, proactive safety advocacy role played by unions is arguably diminished when their presence shrinks. But here's a profound point. Even though membership numbers have declined, the standards that unions fought so hard to establish around wages, benefits, safety, training often persist. They've shaped the entire industry, even in non-union environments. But the consistent pressure to maintain and actively improve those standards is certainly lessened with lower union density.
That's a really important nuance.
Yeah.
So facing these challenges, how are unions responding? What current effort to reorganize and adapt are we actually seeing? Are they finding ways to ensure their relevance in this changing industry?
Oh, they're certainly not sitting idly by. Unions are actively engaging in a whole variety of strategies, some traditional, some quite innovative, to try and adapt and regain ground. One key area is obviously targeted organizing campaigns. They're focusing on new demographics within the workforce, new geographical regions where union density has been low, and even trying to organize sectors of construction that were traditionally almost entirely non-union, like maybe residential construction in some areas. They're also increasingly trying to reframe their value proposition, not just appealing to workers based on solidarity, but actively demonstrating to contractors and even to project owners and clients the tangible benefits of using union labor, emphasizing the higher productivity, the better safety records, the superior quality that comes with a highly trained, stable, professional union workforce.
So they're making a business case, not just an appeal to the traditional blue-collar worker identity, expanding their reach and actively demonstrating their worth to a wider audience, including the people who hire contractors.
Exactly that. It's about showing measurable value. Many unions are also investing heavily in making sure their training programs are absolutely state-of-the-art. They're incorporating the latest technologies: BIM, robotics, drone operation, advanced welding techniques, green building practices, ensuring their members remain at the cutting edge, not behind it. This directly addresses that historical criticism about resisting new technologies. They're aiming to be the source for the most skilled workers for tomorrow's jobs.
Proactive, not reactive.
Right. And they're also forming new kinds of partnerships, collaborating more with community groups on pre-apprenticeship programs to create pathways into the trades for underrepresented populations. working with nonprofit organizations on workforce development initiatives, and even partnering more collaboratively with forward-thinking employers who genuinely recognize the long-term value of investing in a well-trained, stable, unionized workforce. Political advocacy also continues to be absolutely crucial, of course. Campaigning for policies that support workers' rights to organize, protect prevailing wage laws, promote project labor agreements, and ensure fair labor practices across the industry. It's really a multifaceted approach aimed at reasserting their value and ensuring their relevance in the 21st century construction landscape.
It's clear then that despite all the challenges, despite the shifts in membership, unions have had this profound impact, as you said, that really resonates far beyond their current numbers on paper. What is that enduring legacy? What's the takeaway for the industry as a whole?
The profound impact of unions on the construction industry is, I think, undeniable. And in many ways, it's probably irreversible. Even in sectors or regions today where union density might be relatively low, the standards that were originally set by organized labor decades ago have often become the de facto benchmark for the entire industry. Take wages and benefits, for example. The union push for higher wages and comprehensive benefits has historically put significant upward pressure on non-union wages and benefits as well. Non-union contractors, to attract and retain decent workers, have often had to offer more competitive packages than they might have otherwise simply because the union standard exists. That's been a powerful force in lifting overall living standards for construction workers right across the board.
So even if you're working on a non-union site today, you might still be benefiting indirectly, perhaps, from the groundwork that unions laid maybe 50 or 100 years ago.
Right.
Absolutely, you almost certainly are. And the same holds true, maybe even more strongly, for safety standards. Union advocacy was absolutely instrumental in establishing many of the foundational safety regulations and best practices we see today, whether they're now enforced by OSHA or just adopted voluntarily by safety-conscious companies. Their relentless focus on identifying workplace hazards, demanding safer conditions, and empowering workers to speak up created a culture of safety that, while still needing constant vigilance, pervades the entire industry now. It's made construction a fundamentally much safer profession than it was in the dark days that spurred the union's formation.
A huge legacy there.
Huge. And finally, in terms of workforce development skills, that rigorous, structured apprenticeship model pioneered and perfected by the building trades unions has profoundly shaped how skilled crafts are taught and developed. Many non-union training programs, while they might differ in structure or funding, still draw heavily on the principles, the curriculum content, even the instructional methods developed within the union apprenticeship frameworks over many decades. They recognize the effectiveness of that model, combining robust classroom learning with extensive, supervised on-the-job experience. It's truly a lasting legacy of improving the skills, the safety, the livelihoods, and the working conditions of millions of people who have built and continue to build our world. Hashtag outro.
Well, we've really embarked on an incredible deep dive today, haven't we? Tracing this powerful, complex story of trade unions in construction. From their, well, frankly, desperate origins in a world of exploitation, right through to their foundational role in collective bargaining, safety, training.
Yeah, and looking at how they actually work, the hiring halls, the jurisdictional issues.
Exactly. And we've explored the intricate mechanics of their operation. We've candidly addressed the criticisms they face, the costs, the rules, the technology questions. And we've witnessed their ongoing journey, their struggle, really, of adaptation in a very dynamic, constantly changing industry.
It's a narrative that really underscores that constant human quest for fairness, for security, for dignity in the workplace.
Right.
It hasn't gone away.
No, it certainly hasn't. And in a world of, constantly evolving technologies, shifting economic landscapes, global pressures, the story of organized labor in construction continues to unfold. It's not over. And it really challenges all of us, I think, to consider not just the dollar cost of construction, but the human cost and the immense value of having a skilled, a safe, and a justly compensated workforce building our future. So as we build the next chapter of our cities, our infrastructure, our energy systems, what does this ongoing adaptation of construction unions tell us about the evolving social contract between workers and industry? How can we, maybe as a society, ensure that the relentless pursuit of efficiency and innovation, which is important, is always balanced with those fundamental human needs for dignity, for safety, for a fair living? How do we keep shaping our built future with both progress and principle? What will you, listening now, do with this knowledge? How might it change how you see the next construction site you pass, or how you think about the policies that shape work itself, contributing to the next evolution of work and the very foundations of our civilization?